Hello and welcome. My name is Morgan Gendel, and it's great to have you all here for the very first edition of Escape Velocity Extra. I'm on the advisory board of the Museum of Science Fiction, which is producing these events, but I'm also a TV writer specializing in science fiction, most recently as a writer and producer on the CW series The100. Well, we're very fortunate tonight to have on board as our guests a little later this evening some of the actors from that show. The Museum of Science Fiction is a nonprofit here in Washington, D.C., and these events, as well as the terrific Escape Velocity conventions of the last few years, raise money to turn a museum dedicated to sci-fi into reality. So please contribute if you can. It's as easy as tuning in for the entire evening tonight or by going to the Museum of Science Fiction site. With the EVX program, that's Escape Velocity Extra, we're going to take a look every so often at the theme of a particular TV series, then bring together scientists, engineers, astronauts, writers, along with the actors from those series. You know, science fiction explores the worlds of the imagination, but it's really a lens through which we examine our lives today as they are. And so tonight, building on our connection with The100, we're going to look at the concept of a post-apocalyptic Earth. Think of all the ways our civilization could melt down. We're going through one right now. Maybe we're pre-apocalyptic. Well, we're lucky tonight because we have three top scientists, one of whom is also a science fiction writer, here with us tonight to discuss this topic and talk about the various scenarios by which the human civilization could collapse. But luckily, we're also going to talk about how we might cope with those. You know, it was a nuclear apocalypse triggered by artificial intelligence that was the inciting incidents for the TV series The100. And it's now in its 7th and final season, so stay tuned. We're going to be welcoming a little later on 3 of the stars of that show, Richard Harmon, Olsson, and Christopher Larkin. There they are. They're going to be here live soon enough. They're going to talk about what personal ideas they brought to their roles and how their characters relate to tonight's topic. So to join in that discussion, register at the website, escapevelocity.events/EVX. There we go. We have a banner for that too. The cost is only $5 and it's a tax-deductible donation to the Museum of Science Fiction. But first, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's special guest to talk about life after Judgment Day. Our first guest is the Associate Director for Science in the Heliophysics Division at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. He's given dozens of lectures, television, radio interviews for NASA TV, and participated in several Discovery Channel documentaries. He has a passion for solar astrophysics, solar imaging processing, statistics, and data analysis. I feel like I should be saying, here's bachelor number 1, but he's not a bachelor. Please welcome Dr. Alex Young. Hello, Alex.
Hey, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to have you here. Next to join us is a senior astrobiologist at the Planetary Science Institute. His research focuses on climate evolution on Earth, like planets, and implications for habitability. And that's a great skill to have when your home planet is wiped out and you're looking for a new place to live. He's authored 4 books on that subject of human influence on the Earth. Please welcome Dr. David Grinspoon.
Hi there.
Hello, David. Good to see you.
How are you?
Good. It's good for us to all get out of the house a little bit, isn't it?
In our minds, anyways.
That's right. It's a science fiction act right here. Our third guest for this opening segment is the winner of Hugo, Locus, Campbell, and Nebula Awards. That's a lot of awards. He's a physicist, but also a prolific author whose novel, The Postman, was adapted as a feature film starring Kevin Costner. And I'm just getting it beamed in my head. I think he's going to edit and reissue that book, so stay tuned for that. His series, Uplift Universe Novels, has built a legion of followers. Please welcome Dr. David Brin. Hello, David.
I'm embarrassed to be in such august company. I will try to live up to it.
So, David, how many times does the postman ring in your case?
That's an obscure reference. Some of your audience won't get.
Well, they could Google it.
Yes. I've always been very grateful to my former self in his 30s who expunged some of my own fears about apocalypse. Because I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and we were sent under our desks regularly by our
I was
teacher.
with you. You were that guy.
Yeah.
Hold that thought a second. We're going to jump into some questions right now, and we're going to get back to the postman. You know, I want to start with Alex Young for this reason. The best known thing I've written is an episode of Star Trek Next Generation called The Inner Light, and had to do with a civilization whose planet, their sun was going nova. And I think I fudged a little. They had a little too much warning about this thing, or else they were acting too quickly. What's the story of that? Is this part of the cycle of life for every star? And if so, when's it going to happen to our sun?
Well, different stars have different types of life cycles, and it really depends primarily on the size of the star. The sun is an average medium-sized star, and nova, or in the case supernova, actually is not part of the sun's life cycle, and that's where basically a star burns up all its fuel and no longer has pressure inside to support against gravity. It collapses on itself and creates this rebound explosion called a supernova. However, the sun does continue to use up its fuel. It uses up hydrogen, goes to helium, and eventually to carbon and oxygen. And as it does that, as it's evolving, it gets more brighter and brighter. And so it's producing more and more light. And what that's going to mean for us is over the next several 100 million years, the output of the sun is going to increase, and it's going to start to increase the temperature here on Earth. So as we're thinking about climate change and the change in our atmosphere, something that David is very familiar with, this is going to happen with our sun as it gets warmer and warmer over roughly about every, 100 or so million years. It's going to increase the output a couple of degrees here on Earth, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in 300-400 million years, we're going to see increases in temperature just due to the sun of up to 5 or more degrees Celsius, and that's a lot. And that's not even including the current situation with climate change. Eventually, over the next couple of billion years, the sun will get so bright that the oceans will boil. So
Wow.
This is something we're looking to in the future.
It sounds like we have a little time for those things. Wait a second, look who's here, Richard Harmon, giving us a little preview.
I was just backstage listening to all that.
He's come out of our green room.
Back there listening now.
And Richard, we're going to all be with you in a little bit. And thank you for checking in with us.
Yeah, keep doing your thing. I'm going to keep walking.
Good to see you. Hey, back to you quickly, Alex. So it seems like something that might happen a lot sooner. Tell me about coronal mass ejection. Could this happen at any time? And what does it do to civilization?
Yeah, so that's actually what I typically work on is something called space weather. The sun produces huge explosions of energy, releases light. We call that a flash, a solar flare, but can also burp out these huge blobs of solar atmosphere and magnetic field. These things release from the sun, traveling at many millions of miles an hour. And we're talking about billions of tons of solar material. And when that big blob of solar atmosphere, which is an ionized gas and magnetic field, slams into a planet like the Earth that has a magnetic field, it basically rattles that magnetic field, kind of like a bell ringing. And when you move magnetic fields, they generate electrical currents. And that's what happens here on Earth. There are currents traveling up in the upper atmosphere. It also is dumping particles, high energy particles, into the atmosphere, which is changing the chemistry. So huge amounts of energy are pumped into the atmosphere. And we see that in the form of the aurora, but that also creates an electrical environment which impacts our technology. Now, the thing about the sun is it actually creates these eruptions on a time scale or a cycle of roughly 11 years from very low activity, very small, very few CMEs or coronal mass ejections to over the next 4 or 5 years, a lot of them and much bigger ones. And right now we're near solar minimum and we're going to start getting closer and closer to solar maximum, but they can always happen. And if they're big enough, they can not only impact our satellites, our ability to communicate with GPS and radio waves, but it can actually generate currents that are picked up by large conductors on the ground, and that happens to be power lines, power grids.
Wow.
And so
does it knock out the
that's
grid?
not good.
Start fires? What? Well, let me ask David Grinspoon to jump in here. I know you organized a symposium on the longevity of human civilization. Let's start with this. Is this one of the ways that we think, our civilization, I don't know if it's a people killer, but it sounds like it's a civilization killer. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We could ask what we even mean with the word civilization. By some reasonable definitions, we don't quite have one yet. If you define it as a, globally coherent, technologically enabled society that has some longevity built into it, then it arguably remains to be seen. But there are certain threats we've made ourselves more vulnerable to, and others that we've kind of erased potentially. I mean, we're in an interesting time in history where the landscape of existential threats has been changing. We've become planet changers, and now we're becoming aware that we're planet changers. And it's kind of what we do with that knowledge. If we use that knowledge of ourselves as planet changers to conduct ourselves in a long-term way, then we're potentially immune to a lot of threats. And you can talk about some threats like the asteroid that did in the dinosaurs. That doesn't have to do us in. So we can save ourselves in some ways. But yes, we've made ourselves more vulnerable to things like CMEs by making ourselves so dependent on this interconnected technology that could be wiped out. And then, of course, there are future threats that some of which we're in the process of creating. So we're tamping down some, and we're potentially building up some others.
I guess you could draw an analogy to today. We could have prepared ourselves much better for pandemic, and we didn't. So absolutely. I guess this applies to a lot of things you're talking about.
There were people who told us exactly that this would happen and exactly what we should do about it. But did we listen? No.
So you're saying out of the many things you look at that could impact us, many of them are mitigatable, if I may.
Yeah, and then there's some that are of our own making. But yes, I mean, the classic example is the asteroid. We don't, it would be really dumb at this point, now that we have a space program, to get hit by a big asteroid. we can see it coming and swat it away.
Cool. Well, we got to get Bruce Willis on that because he's the only one who knows how to do it. Dr. Brin, let me bring you back in because I want to go back to the Postman, because that actually describes a world that has been hit by electromagnetic pulses and bioweapons, and a couple things in your novel that give us food for thought today. I know there are so many, but I want to focus on two. One that really gets to me is that your hero, Gordon Krantz, was admired once he put on a postal worker's jacket. And contrary to what the man in the White Castle says today, I think people are pretty proud of our postal workers. They're keeping us all going with our Amazon goods and all that. Were you prescient when you wrote this, or have we been taking government services for granted all these years and you kind of sense that?
Well, you asked a mouthful of questions there. For one thing, I think the man in the White Castle was Harold and Kumar. But
I meant the man who eats White Castle. I'm sorry.
I see. Right. Well, the Postman was partly generated by my own fears, but I always thought there were major flaws in the dramatic use of apocalypse. And one is that the hero, it does everything himself. And there's no thought about civilization. And actually, the original 3 Mad Max films were actually much more pro-civilization and thoughtful than your typical, quote, Mad Max movie. Although the most recent horrible one certainly did fit into the stereotype genre. The point is that in The Postman, the main character knows that he cannot defeat this villain and his armies. But people can. And with the right symbolism and the right stories, perhaps he might remind the survivors in this future world that they once had been mighty beings called citizens, and that it's in their power.
Well, we're seeing that today, aren't we? Isn't that exactly what we're seeing?
We are, without getting too political, except joining these guys and wearing a hat, only my hat has more a symbolic meaning. The point is that in the Postman, the second cliche was, I don't believe that any one thing, except for a giant asteroid or a giant supervolcano, could knock us back to the level of most post-apocalyptic tales.
Oh, interesting.
I think we have a fantastically creative and resilient civilization, and so one of the points in the book is that it took everything. There was a nuclear war, and we survived, and we're on our way back. There were plagues, and we worked together. And the final thing that brought it down was a plague of selfishness and, shall we say, something that we recognize in the news, and that is nuts creating little armories out in the middle of the woods, and billionaire nuts thinking that they can leave us to our own devices by heading off to high castles in Patagonia and New Zealand and under the sea, and especially a large number of them in the Urals.
If I may, it feels like you should push to have this remade. It would be such a terrific movie right now.
Well, actually,
what science fiction does is tell us about how we lived.
I'm not revealing too much to say that there is very serious talk with some of the powers in Hollywood of doing a miniseries or a TV series.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
I will also say that those who are watching this show should look underneath in comments. The Escape Velocity folks will offer links offered by these fine, handsome, bearded fellows. And also a link to an article that I created for the Naval Postgraduate School in the CIA about various resilience holes in our civilization.
I was going to say, I want to pivot back to that since we have such limited time. You kind of talked about all the things in that book that happened. Here's my second question about it. Is it more or less likely than it was in the 80s that we're going to see huge destructive force from EMPs and bioweapons? It felt for a while we were very nervous about those, and now we've backed off. Where do you think we are on the clock, whatever that clock is?
Oh, I think that EMPs and bioweapons are quite plausible now, and perhaps more so than they were in the past. I think that actual spasm nuclear war is much less plausible than it was.
I see. But
some things rise, some things go down, and I'll let you guys link to that article I've already sent.
So Dr. Grinspoon, you feel that we might be even more prepared for these, or just the fact that we know about them and talking about them could lead, under sane leadership, to preparation. Yeah,
well, I mean, I very much agree with David Brin's point that there are not very many things that could actually wipe out our civilization. There are massive catastrophes one could imagine that are best avoided that would not end civilization. I mean, we're all very worried about climate change right now. I cannot see climate change ending human civilization. I can see it causing a lot of pain for a lot of people in a lot of places, and we need to try to do everything we can to ease that transition away from excess carbon for that reason. But it's not going to end civilization. It could cause warfare and conflict, and then there are scenarios by which there are various weapons of war that one could imagine would potentially bioweapons. Or I agree with David Brin, nuclear war is more likely as regional than global, but even a regional nuclear war can cause a nuclear winter, which then can cause global famine. And again, that's not necessarily going to end civilization, but it's going to be a phase of history we would not want to live through. And then there are sort of the wild cards that are impossible to predict, like artificial intelligence. There are a lot of scenarios by which artificial intelligence will not be that bad, and I tend to be constitutionally an optimist. There are some scenarios by which it can help us very much deal with other threats, but nobody really, there's no experts in artificial intelligence, I don't think. The more I listen to the experts, the more I'm convinced nobody knows what's going to happen. And there are certainly scenarios by which artificial intelligence could certainly transform our civilization into something unrecognizable, at least.
I want to tell you guys something, and the audience, something an artificial intelligence expert told me recently that we hadn't thought of. And then I got to go back to Alex, because I want to pivot to a slightly different point of view here. This AI expert said what we're not realizing is that once they become that intelligent and have to interact, they're going to take on some of our ego-driven traits, and you're going to see that one part of AI that has to deal with another part of AI at some point for self-preservation to say, I don't want to share the right information with that pod. They're going to start working against each other. We have much less to fear, this scientist says, from artificial intelligence attacking us than we do just have to deal with artificial intelligence dealing with each other, just like people would be. This has to be a book. So Brin, we'll have to talk about it. Let's take 1 second and say hi to Christopher Larkin, who's just showing his face there. So nice to see you. You look so relaxed for a quarantine, but you're in a place that's opening up more readily than other places, correct?
Yeah, so I should look far less relaxed than I do right now. The city is the worst. Hi, everybody. I feel like when I entered, the intelligence level just dropped a lot in this panel, so I will let you guys keep talking.
People are waiting to see you, so we'll talk a little more. And then everybody remember, and Keith maybe put up a banner again to see Chris and Ty and Richard. They're going to enter a different room for this with a little donation. So thank you, Chris, and we will see you in a bit. Thanks for dropping by. So Alex, here's what I want to pivot to. Okay. You manage a very large staff focused on education and outreach. I would think someone like you would be prized in a post-apocalyptic world, because what are the secrets of getting large groups of people to work together? Isn't that something we're going to need as much as we're going to need technology?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is something we're talking about now with just the idea of wearing your mask so that you're not only taking care of yourself, but more importantly, you're taking care of everyone around you. I mean, it really does come down to thinking about working as a team, trying to achieve a larger goal together. There is no one person that's any more important than anybody else. Everybody is valuable and everybody provides something. I mean, that's certainly how I have to manage the team that I have. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone is just as important. And if it doesn't work that way, the team isn't going to work. I mean, it's really that simple.
David, jump in if you want. I'm very intrigued with the idea of how we get people to believe in science enough to, like David Grinspoon, you're talking about preparing for this. We have to get people to believe in science. Can science alone do that? Do we need science fiction to do that? David, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How do we get people to believe in enough science to prepare properly?
Beauty before age.
Well, I mean, it's a good question. It's a very germane question to what's happening right now, because it's very disturbing that it's never been more clear that it's not enough to have the right scientific knowledge how to deal with a problem that somebody in society knows the answer. If that's not widely embraced, and we've seen this for a long time with the question of climate change. You know, why won't you listen to us experts? But now with the pandemic, it's sort of accelerated the extent to which the fact that people aren't listening to the experts is manifested in dangerous things happening. And so it's a vexing problem. But I do think that a big part of the answer is telling good stories. And whether that's fiction or compelling nonfiction, human beings respond. They don't necessarily respond to facts and figures, but they respond to stories that they connect with. And I think that's something that, whether we're science communicators or people that write science fiction, that is a role we can play, is just to put the knowledge we have into compelling narratives that will bring people along.
You know, is it that? And I want to hear what Dr. Brin has to say, but I just want to say, is it that, or do we have to go back? David Brin, you talked about how when we're similar in age, we remember getting under the desks, and I don't know what they thought that was going to do if an atomic bomb hit, but do we need to go back to school-age kids and start just, have we done something wrong to have so many grown-ups who don't like science? Okay, now I'll let you answer.
Well, I think it's very important that we have, first off, regarding AI, the notion that they would be divided into multiple AIs is, I think, the most important thing that we can impose as we develop AI, because breaking up power so that the powerful must compete with each other is the great invention of the Western Enlightenment. It's underlies democracy and science, utilizing competition and forcing the mighty to compete with each other. And that's what they're trying not to do. That's what the whole purpose of what's been politically imposed on us. But as far as the education of the public, well, Hollywood's been doing that, and I accuse you, Morgan. Hollywood's been doing that for a very long time. And if you, I'll provide an essay that you can link to below. There are 5 basic messages, wholesome messages that Hollywood has been pushing, and 2 unwholesome ones. Number 1, in every Hollywood drama, TV, movie, whatever, there's suspicion of authority. And so we have become a civilization that has preached to its children for 5 generations at least that you will face authority figures who you'll be bravely opposed, because that's what the protagonists in all the films do. And the biggest difference in normal times between a Republican and a Democrat is who you think is trying to become Big Brother. However, in normal times, you're willing to grudgingly admit that the other guy's enemies could also be Big Brother. The biggest problem with being in a state of civil war like we're in right now is we get tunnel vision and only believe that our side's threatening elites could possibly be dangerous. There's also tolerance, diversity, and eccentricity. The hero in every film displays an eccentric trait, and that helps bond with the audience. The unwholesome messages that are spread and that have contributed to our problems are no institution can ever work, and your neighbors are all useless sheep. And the reason why filmmakers and TV show makers do this is because it makes plotting easier. It's difficult to plot your hero into post-pounding jeopardy if there are skilled and honest institutions that will leap to her aid, or all you have to do is knock on a neighbor's door and the neighbor says, "Really? Hold on there. Let's go." So that was a little bit of a rant. There'll be an essay about it below. But the main thing that I'm trying to say is we should teach science, yes. STEM, yes. A large part of our current phase of the Civil War, phase 8, of our current phase of the Civil War is a war against all fact professions. But putting all of that aside, there are deep messages that have been educating people, and we see people out on the streets now because of these healthy memes and also the not so healthy ones.
I got to jump in, because speaking of people being out on the street, we have somebody who I know was on his motorcycle recently. We have Ty Olsson, who's going to be with us very shortly in our 100 room. But Ty, thank you for showing up. How are you? How does it feel to get out of the house?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I stepped into this room and I heard Dr. So-and-so and I went, oh, I'm in the wrong room.
You're ready for your exam. Yes.
They all have masses of books behind them and I have fake flowers.
Your colleague said the same thing, but you know what? You don't fool me a bit. Look at that handsome beard.
Thank you.
You might, no offense to the other guys, but he's an actor. He might get the beard award. Ty, we're going to see you in a few minutes in the 100 room. Thanks for showing up and saying hi.
I wish I had stepped in earlier. It was an interesting conversation. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Say, we just have a few minutes left, but there are a couple more things. There's a ton more things I want to talk about. Dr. Grinspoon, are you familiar with the book Sapiens?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. It's a great book. Here's what I want to ask you about that. I think Yuval Noah Harari makes quite the case that the worst species to ever exist on planet Earth is Homo sapiens, and we're always devastating to other species on the planet. Is it possible after some kind of apocalyptic event that we would be diminished, but some other species might do very well? Is that anything you've given thought to? And really what I'd like to know is which species is going to become dominant if we become less dominant?
First, I just have to quickly say I'm a little more pro-human than that.
Okay.
I mean, I recognize we have caused a lot of extinctions, and we're causing more now. And there are things to not be proud of, but we are also the first species ever to become aware that they're causing extinction and to contemplate the idea of not causing extinction. And so there's a dual-sided nature there that's a little more complicated than just saying we suck. But your question is an interesting one. If we go, who's gonna last? And I mean, if the human species goes extinct, which is a different kind of event than just ending our civilization, but if that happens, there are a lot of species that are much more robust and would probably survive whatever wiped us out. For one thing, most of life on Earth is bacteria, and they're way more robust than anything else. But there are certainly a lot of interesting animal species that probably have the ability to evolve, potentially have the ability to evolve technological civilization, perhaps in the future. People talk about the covids, that is the smart birds, crows, and it turns out they're very smart, and they have some manipulative ability. Elephants, I think, are underrated as smart, manipulative social beings. There's the intriguing possibility that an insect society could become an intelligent civilization, global species at some point. I wouldn't rule out any of these things, but I also wouldn't say there's anybody like sort of on the doorstep waiting to take over right away if we leave the scene. Some of these capabilities take a long time to evolve.
But we took a long time to get to us, and we've only been here for the blink of an eye. Is it like 1 million years or 10 million years, and elephants are walking around and they can manipulate things and talk, or dolphins are doing it from
modern humans have been here, depending on how you look at it, for a couple 100,000 years or less, where you start the clock. But hominids, which is our genus, we're talking many millions of years, and probably it's that last time scale that's more relevant for what you're talking about. So I think easily millions of years before elephants are driving whatever the equivalent of their cars are. But it's also, these things are very nonlinear, and we still don't fully understand the some of the rapid jumps that happened in humans going from being just another animal to being our technological civilization building species. So there's certainly some slop in those time estimates.
This relates to what Alex was saying about the timetable for the sun heating up. And I'll provide a link for what I think is the only way we could move the Earth outward in the solar system. But that's a little too whimsical for right now. What it matters is that in the calculations of the Fermi paradox, that I think by far the biggest problem is getting an intelligent species that's capable of the kind of reflection that David was talking about, being able to notice what they're doing to the Earth. And it's not even the species, it's only a couple of human cultures that were able to contemplate abstractions like that. I believe that humans were not sapient until just 40,000 years ago, when there was a sudden software shift. And it may have been a mutation that enabled that sudden software shift. I talk about that in my novel Existence. But the main thing is that if you look at the number of species that have borderline sapience, that are crowded against a glass ceiling like corvids, not covids.
That's an important distinction right now. Thank you.
And dolphins are a little bit above, chimpanzees You have sea lions. There's a very large number of elephants. It seems that nature allows up to this point very easily, but does not allow you to crash through. And we crashed through by huge margins, and that's why I believe the whole galaxy is waiting for us.
And that goes to my last question, because we're out of time, but I want to ask one last question, see if we can get a quick answer from each of you. You know, in science fiction, even in The 100, in their latest season, they end up going to another planet. We see this all the time. You were all on a panel I moderated talking about that very thing. What are the chances of even getting to another planet or finding life? But just a very brief answer from each of you. Alex, you're looking at out there in the galaxy. Are there suns that are in that Goldilocks zone of the right age, the right temperature, the right distance from a habitable planet? I'd just like to hear quickly from each of you. Is there another alternative? Is there a place we can go?
We think so. We certainly see. I mean, we've found 4,000+ extrasolar planets. The problem is the Earth-sized ones are very hard to see. Right now, we see we have trouble with that. We do have a new spacecraft called TESS, which is giving us a survey of the entire sky, which will give us tens of thousands. And then the next step, we have a spacecraft, the James Webb Space Telescope, which will allow us to look at the atmosphere. So we're seeing, we do know there are sun-like stars. We're seeing planets that we think could play a similar role. But there's also a lot of speculation and ideas that maybe the Earth is really kind of odd, Yeah, and our solar system is kind of odd, and I'm sure David Grinspoon knows a little bit more about that. But yeah, they're out there. They're definitely out there. But we're still trying to figure out that. Yeah.
Let's get quick answers from each of the David, and then we're going to be out of time.
Yeah, I mean, what Alex is speaking to is the possibility that there are habitable planets that are somewhat like Earth. It's a somewhat different question whether those are places we could just go and easily live. I don't believe there are going to be many, perhaps not even any, planets that are similar enough to Earth that we could just beam down and walk around and breathe the air and eat the fruit like they did on the original Star Trek. Sometimes the planets are very particularly co-evolved with their life forms. So there may be some that would be easier and harder, but I don't think there are going to be any planets we could just live without a habitat or without terraforming that planet, which is going to be a lot of work. So it might ultimately be easier to live in habitats that we build in space than to live on other planets. Although we will certainly go and live on other planets because it's in our nature to go and do crazy things and live in crazy places. But I don't think it's going to be easy.
That's one of our other David's favorite topics. So neocolonies, we don't have time to talk about it now, so I'm going to ask you for a 30-second answer. Elon Musk seems to think our neighbor is the right place to go. 30 seconds. What do you think of us going to Mars?
Well, Elon's notion that we need lifeboats and that we need a sort of secure second homes, I think is a valid one. I think that it is a divine madness to think that we can push the pace as fast as he has succeeded in pushing it. So I mean the divine more than the madness, because that's how civilizations are made. And those who are watching this right now, learn more about the divine madness of making a science fiction museum in Washington, D.C., because I think there is no town on the planet that needs it more. And that meme could change all of human civilization, and I believe the galaxy is waiting for us.
Thank you so much. This is such a fascinating topic, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear more. So we'll just have to do it again. Alex Young, David Grinspoon, David Brin, thank you very much. And we just have another 30 seconds before we go off to the next room. Keith, if you could pop me out a bit, please. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
So, by the way, if this were a brick and mortar convention, I would be offering copies of my original writer's draft of The Inner Light with a personalized autograph. I'm happy to do the same, even though we're virtual today, but just email me, innerlightwriter@gmail.com. And the proceeds from the Inner Light personalized autograph to you are going to the Capital Area Food Bank, which is really helping out a lot of people always, but especially during these pre-apocalyptic times. I can also give you some information on my sci-fi novel, Planet 6. Email me. I look forward to it. And I look forward to seeing you at part 2 of our program. And again, here's the link. Let's show the link for anybody who doesn't know it yet to get to that program. There we go. For Escape Velocity Extra and the Museum of Science Fiction, thanks for joining us. See you next time. Hello and welcome back to session 2 of Escape Velocity Extra. Hope some of you were tuned in to session 1. We had a great panel of scientists talking about post-apocalyptic worlds, but here we are now to talk about a very specific post-apocalyptic world. It's a place called the Earth on a show called The 100. And in this session, we will be joined by 3 stars of the CW Network hit TV show. And if you're watching this, you're probably already a huge fan of the show and can't wait to hear from the actors. So let's get right to it. Our first guest's character, Mont Green, is the character's name, lived a full heroic life through 5 seasons of The 100, and his character saved Sky Crew's bacon on numerous occasions with his brilliance and innovation. He most recently appeared in last year's Netflix miniseries, Tales of the City. Let's say hello to Christopher Larkin.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Chris. Chris, good to see you.
You too.
Our next guest is a legend in the world of science fiction, having appeared in Supernatural, Aliens vs. Predator, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Stargate SG-1, Battlestar Galactica, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes, among many others. He appeared in The 100 as Nyko, the compassionate grounder healer. Let's welcome Ty Olsson.
Hey, y'all. Hope you're
Hello
all doing
again,
well.
Ty. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Last but not least, one of the top billed stars of the show since season 1, in addition to his role as John Murphy in The 100, he has appeared in more than 60 movies and television series, including The Killing, Bates Motel, Caprica, Flash Gordon, Smallville, and Continuum. Let's bring on Richard Harmon. Hello again, Richard.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, guys, wasn't that kind of fun? You got to listen to those scientists a little bit. It's like...
I
it's
watched the
fun to
entire thing. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm about to be here to tell them what, post-apocalyptic worlds are really like.
That's right. They can dream, but you guys live the real thing.
They got some ideas. I've got some facts.
That's right.
By all of them were sitting behind rows and rows of books, and I've got fake flowers.
I literally saw it. I saw the same thing you did. I was like, how many books do these guys have?
I have a big screen TV. How shallow can you get? I just put this cool logo on it. But let's face it, it's my TV.
So there you go. In front of my fridge.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's quite all right. Look, guys, here we are in this pre-apocalyptic world, talking about a fictional post-apocalyptic world. You each seem to bring a specialty that might be useful in bad times. Richard, let's start with you. it's kind of an actor's dream to play a bad guy who then gets redeemed.
Yeah.
If a real apocalypse hit, is there a lesson we can learn from John Murphy? Do you need to be a little cold and unfeeling to survive? Or does Murphy live as long as he did only because he started out being a good guy? Started being a good guy, not started out, started being a good guy for a while.
I think if he was a good guy from the very beginning of the show, I think he would be dead by now, undoubtedly. I think he would have died in the first season, for sure.
Really?
God, yeah. But I think him finding a little bit of his morality in there towards the middle and specifically coming in towards the end, that has helped him also stay alive. I think you need a little bit of a mix of both. You can't just be so one or the other. You need to be able to let your morals slide sometimes within the right realm of reason.
So what's the takeaway for you, having lived this character so long? In real life, can you be a little bit, hey, I'm going to be a little bit of a bad guy for a while, get me what I want? Or does it only work when you're acting?
No, I luckily live a life that hopefully we all live, where I don't ever have to be a bad guy to live.
Yeah.
I'm able to just stay inside in my living room and be totally okay.
I read this funny quote. It's like, no matter how good of life you live, in somebody's story, in somebody's life, you are the bad guy.
Oh, I've been told that a few times. Yeah, definitely.
That reminds me of what they say in a writer's room. They say in every writer's room, there's one asshole. And if you look around the room and you can't find the asshole, then it's you.
Morgan, who is the asshole in season 4?
Oh, good question.
In the writer's room?
Yeah, we're turning around on you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll call you later.
Yeah.
That might be a case where I looked around and couldn't find out who it was. So I don't know if I want to go there.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, as long as we're talking to you, Monty was a tech whiz. Is that you in real life? You played it pretty convincingly.
No.
God, no.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
God, no. Farthest thing from it. Go
Really?
on. Go on. I'll be here to check you if you're.
Show us your phone. Show us your phone.
That's
there
my,
it is.
Oh my
there
God.
It is.
that like
Wow.
I'm a really bad Asian. My worst subjects were math and science from the start through college. So no, I'm a horrible techie in life.
It's a flip phone. Flip phone. That's collectible, man.
I can't text him. I can only email the man. That's the only way that you'll get back to me.
Is this just?
By the
is
way,
this
Chris, I am emailing you back. It's just there's a lot to talk.
Thanks,
Is
dude.
it just a cool thing now? It's so cool to have a flip phone, or do you really not use a smartphone?
No, I've never had one. They're coming back. Aren't they back flip phones? They're making like, I don't know.
Yeah, they're bringing him back
They
apparently.
have folding
Now
screens.
you're gonna be trying to be hip all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So now you're gonna have
I'll get a
now he's getting a smartphone.
Chris, you're making music now. Doesn't that take some technical know-how or not? What do you play? What instrument do you play?
Let's play just acoustic. But it's
There
all
you
in
go.
GarageBand. Technical, it's like meant for dummies.
Got it.
We'll have your song on my computer.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
And we're bannering a link to your some of your stuff, so I got to check that out.
There you go.
Oh,
That's cool.
be easy on it.
Hey, Ty.
Yeah.
I guess being a healer for the grounders is kind of old school knowledge, but how does that work? Did you go to grounder med school? Is that what they set up there? You 3 years in a residency? How does that work?
I've been to ape school before, but never a med school. I think I had to really act for that one.
How did it work? How did it work for Nyko? How did he get to be a healer? Does some old lady teach you how to do that? I really want to know.
The story that I created is that he used to be a warrior, and that if you take off his jacket and his shirt, that he's got hundreds and hundreds of kill scars, and that he literally basically had an epiphany one day that he was tired of killing, and having been a warrior for so long, treating his own wounds and learning how to deal with ailments and stuff like that. Once he decided that he wasn't going to take any more lives, he dedicated himself to becoming a healer. So in my imagination, you take off his shirt, he's just littered with kill scars.
And did we ever see that? I don't remember. Did he ever take his shirt off?
Never
So this
made
is your own. Did the writers come up with this? Is this in your own head too?
completely in my own head.
I love it though. It's what that should have been an episode.
Yeah, I think it would have been cool. I mean, the thing with Nyko is he was such a great character. I think he was created to be a best friend to Lincoln. And then after that, I'm not sure what happened, like whether they knew what to do with him. And I had great ideas in my head, but it's such a, dynamic cast and such a giant world.
Well, it is.
You all struggled with wanting to get your storyline in there once in a while, you know?
And you know what you all go through? I'm hearing this now. There's sort of a yin and yang thing to every character. Nyko, you think was a warrior, then a healer. Murphy, both good guy and bad guy. Monty took a turn to the dark side, right? Chris, was it season 3 that you were Pike's right-hand man, so to speak? Season 2 or season 3?
Yeah, I think it was 3. I blew Mom, but we took care of that.
Yeah, that's right. But I would say you went to the dark side a little bit. So maybe this is this just good drama to have diversity of attitude even within a single character? Or did any of you have to nudge the writers and say, look, I don't want to be a one note, make me bad, make me good? Tell me how this comes out, because it seems to work great for an actor to be able to play both sides. Anybody?
I'll take it. I think that it does make a character much more interesting to kind of be able to, not just be a one note kind of person. Nobody wants to watch a character like that unless they're in it for just one scene for either comedy or some sort of effect. Those are the only types of things that could be one note, is if you're really there for quite a short period of time. So no, I'm not personally did I ever need to nudge the writers in any sort of direction. I thought I was just going to be bad and that was going to be fun until I died.
Right.
And then it was them that were like, oh, I'll keep you around. Maybe you can get the audience on your side a little bit. And I was like, I'll try my best.
I think you've gotten to a truism about humanity. Probably you look around at the world today, it can't be just black and white. It can't be all these people think one way and they're right, all these other people think the other way and they're wrong. We must all have a lot of good and bad. Isn't that a Michael Jackson song?
Well, real human characters go through growth and changes, right? We're all the sum of our experience,
Yeah.
Sometimes it turns people into bad people and bad people into good people, depending on how you're affected by it and how you just choose to grow from it. And that's true with the characters we play.
Yeah, it's very cool to see just the fact that we have 3 actors and they've all gone not through the same thing at all, but they have to go through certain things to just reflect the humanity. Look, while we're talking about bad times, I want to ask about lockdown a little. Richard, you have a sister who is also on the show. Mm-hmm. Jessica Harmon as Nyla. I was thinking having a sibling on the same show is kind of like people ended up in lockdown with their families. How was it having a sister around while you were shooting? Good or bad?
Luckily, she didn't have to be around me all that much. We never shared too many scenes together. But it was pretty cool. I remember when she got the show. There's nothing else to say about it other than it was pretty cool that we both ended up on the same show eventually.
I got a question. Really, let's get to brass tacks. What's it like? Part of Canadian film royalty.
Well, Ty, it feels good. It feels real good.
For anybody who doesn't know out there, the Harmon family has been in the film and television industry in Canada for decades, and they're all wonderful people, and you've all made a huge impact on the Canadian film and television industry, and you guys should be proud of that. So how's that being part of that shit, man?
That feels good. That feels real good. Yeah, it feels solid. By the way, Ty, mom and dad doing real good. Happy and healthy, you'll be glad to hear.
Good. That is good to hear.
And I think Jess and Lenny are up on some lake right now, relaxing in the sunshine.
I guess what I was getting at, did she ever say, Richard, you're really acting like Murphy right now, so cut that out,
I don't know if I ever act like Murphy too much, although it'd be better to ask these guys if I ever acted like Murphy. I don't know if I did.
I think it's different with a sibling, but
oh no, Jess and I have a very specific relationship, which we know well. I wouldn't say it's Murphy towards her. It's more just Richard Harmon being an asshole to his sister.
Brother.
So let me pivot back to Chris.
Your brother. That's it.
I want to pivot back to Chris for a second. Okay, Monty's a tech whiz. Chris is not. Having played somebody like that, what do you feel now? Is it kind of weird when you feel people, his technical skills were so needed. Is it weird to see now so many people rejecting science? I'm carrying over a little of what we talked about in the last thing. What's seeing through the lens of having played Monty, what do you think when you look at people who say, oh, I don't need to do this, or I don't need to wear a mask? Do you have a different feeling about it than you might have before you did the show?
No, when it comes to like COVID specific now, but LA's just reopening, it reopened like last Friday, and you can see the division, like 50% of people are wearing masks and honoring the protocol, and then half just don't give a shit at all. It's really disheartening. We're trying to play it safe and play by the rules. But when half the people aren't doing it, it really, yeah, we'll see what happens. I can't wait.
It seems to me The 100 was a little bit about a show. What happens? Because look, one minute they thought there were no survivors and they had to leave Earth, and then there were survivors, but the survivors were people who had the education knocked out of them. You know, they were starting from scratch. And if you look at it, it's kind of a series about what happens when these hyper smart people who are in orbit come down to the ground, where there are people who did not have med school for their healers. And I don't know, it's weird that now, all these years later since it started, it's kind of a metaphor for what's going on now. Any thoughts about that, bringing it to current day?
Yeah, Ty.
Yeah,
Well,
Ty, out there,
It is
out there riding your motorcycle.
this happens when we are, and please don't anybody take this wrong, but education is key. And when people lack the education about science, they lack trust in it. And so when we underfund our schools, underfund education in our society, the results are evident. We get people that are suspicious of science. I mean, a caveman thought that, thunder was God angry. And I mean, the more ignorant you are to science and facts, of course people are going to believe it. And so, of course, in the 100, that's what happened as well. When you get people that are raised with no formal education and basically generations of just surviving, they start believing in sky gods and stuff. And we kind of see that now. I mean, if you look at the people who are COVID deniers, if you will, and science deniers, and the Earth is flat and Australia's a made-up place. I mean, the amount of ridiculous things
In there, not made up.
I know.
Can attest to that one.
That are out. And why is that? Oh, it's because people aren't traveling, because people aren't educated, that we're not putting money into education. We're not putting money into science, education, and general education. And yeah, I mean, that's what the 100 is exactly what happens when you remove outsiders out of society.
We nailed it.
That's some great insights. I would almost like to leave it at that, but I got one more question I want to ask, a very quick question. I mentioned it to a couple of you guys because I wonder, where are the pets on the 100? So we hit an apocalypse. Which species do you want to see survive in addition to humans? Chris?
Sorry, I jumped line.
No, jump in. I have to think about it. Go for it.
I'm going
Richard.
wolves. That's easy spot for me. Wolves. First off, I love them. Secondly, wolves always just seem to temper things into like a better situation, into kind of the way that it should be.
They're just pre-dogs, though. They're eventually going to become dogs again. They're going to hang out with us for 100,000 years, and they'll be dogs.
No, they're
I mean,
not.
eventually, maybe.
We're going to eat the dogs because they're the most domesticated. So we eat those first, and then the wild ones become wolves again. They're the ones that are
Okay.
I'll go.
Well, that's your answer. I don't know if we could top that. Hey, guys, thank you so much. I think you're going into private chat rooms. I hope it's not what it sounds like. It sounds like fun, but...
Do I have to change?
Huh?
Do I have to change my clothes?
I'm taking requests for my clothing in mind.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the time on this. Oh, let me find out from Keith. Are we supposed to answer some questions first? I'm not sure. Maybe we do some Q&As. Well, let me do that since he's popping them up.
Yeah.
Who is that for? Do you guys see this too, by the way? Do you see
I do.
So let's see who wants to answer. As an actor, how do you handle telling different stories? In other words, a character-driven story versus a plot-heavy story. In other words, in science fiction stories. Who wants to take that one?
Chris.
Are you kidding me? No, of course, the guy who has the most credits in film and TV passes it to the guy who has very few credits.
I know that.
It's about you. It's about playing.
You should check Ty's IMDb before you.
Right. I mean, I'll let these guys tackle from the film and TV angle. I mean, for me, the biggest switch was between television and theater, just very different processes. So when I joined the 100, I was like completely green. I didn't really know anything. And so it was a bit of a fish out of water, learning as I went. I was surprised at how fast everything moves. You have one day and then it's out of your head forever because you're always moving on. It's always fresh. I guess what I missed though is having like a month rehearsal period and being able to really and run something chronologically with a live audience. So that's big. But you guys speak to your
This is tailor-made for you. This Zoom thing. We'll have you back, and you've got a huge audience of tens and tens and tens of people here today. I don't know how many. I know how many.
First of all, it's a bit of a trick question for an actor, because for the actor who's playing the role, it's always character driven.
That's what I thought.
That's
right. Yeah, I mean, yes, it might be a plot-heavy show, and the director's worried about that, but our job as actors, it's always the character. So if you're getting stuck in worrying about the plot, that's really, you've lost the plot, because it's really about you fulfilling that character, his needs, his goals, his wants, his obstacles.
You got to do your job.
Yeah.
That's up to someone else.
And frankly, as a writer, I have to do my job, which is I have to keep the character on top all the time. Even if I'm writing an action thing, it's got to be, how does the action impinge on this character? So good thoughts about that. Amanda Richard is asking, personally, what's your favorite part of your character's journey? I think we're just going to go to Chris every time. Richard, what's your favorite part of your character's journey?
I like being bad. I miss being bad. But it's been fun because he's been able to kind of, you know what? I think the favorite part of the journey was kind of changeability, if that's actually even a word. I'm not 100% certain it is anything that I could think of as an actor to do with Murphy, the kind of character he was, I could do it, and they just sort of, people would buy it. You know, like he had done so much stuff over the 7 seasons that sort of, by the end of it, it was like, whatever you want to do. He's done it all. So if he wants to go good, bad, middle, just lose it. If he wants to fall asleep in the middle of a scene, it'll probably work out somehow. So I kind of like that changeability of him in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Keith, are you out there? Any other questions? There's one from Sophie Becker. Which fictional character would be the most exciting to meet in real life? Wow. That's a hard one. But
wait, fictional character from The 100 or fictional character from?
It sounded like any fictional character.
Oh man,
SpongeBob would be a good time. I'd like to get into those shenanigans.
Damn it.
Yeah, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just read the Wolf Hall novels, and man, Thomas Cromwell sounds like an interesting dude. So
there you go. Anyone else?
Fitzchivalry Farseer from the Farseer books, which most people probably won't know.
Yeah, I wanted to sound really smart, so I didn't say my first instinct, which was Luke Skywalker. So
that would also be pretty cool.
We'll just leave it at that. I think I saw another question come in. Who's better at spaceship soccer, Raven or Murphy?
That was already determined. I already beat her.
Oh.
I already beat her. Keep in mind that I shot her in the spine and permanently messed up her hip a couple of years before beating her in spaceship soccer. So I might have, it was a little bit of an unfair advantage I had. I would say if I hadn't had done that, I think she would have beaten me for sure.
I think you still won.
What else do we got here? I'm waiting to find out. I think maybe if I'm popped out, that must mean we're coming to an end here. I think we're going to thank our actors, Christopher Larkin, Ty Olsson, and Richard Murphy for Richard Harmon as John Murphy.
Thank you.
And I don't think we have any more questions. So I think we're going to say goodnight. You guys are going into autograph signing.
Right.
Awesome.
Bye.
Digital autograph signing?
Something like that.
Something.
See you guys.
Something.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Morgan.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Morgan.
Bye, guys.